Hey, welcome everybody to the first round panel that we have at Lovebyte. I have with me today Superogue, Tomcat, and Freddy. Quick introduction: Superogue was on the demo scene in the 90s under Logic Design. He then did a retirement session and then came back a couple of years ago doing a lot of size coding stuff. Tomcat been on the demo scene also since the 90s. He founded Abaddon a long time ago, and he's been active throughout. I think he was retired for a few years there, but he's been mostly active. And Freddy's like a total Atari legend from '89. Like, I didn't even know the demo scene existed in '89, and he's been doing stuff on
It didn't.
Atari. He created the Atari demo scene back in '89.
Well, I didn't know there was a demo scene. So
So yeah, but he's been active on the Atari ever since, doing size coding stuff, and he's also joining us for this roundtable. So the first question that I have for you guys: best platforms to learn size coding for total noobs and veterans. Super Rogue, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna mention the TIC 80 for absolutely beginners. It's a fantasy console, so there are things to think about that or not. But if you can you can choose your own language, so you can code in Lua, which is the default, but also use JavaScript. And I think you can do some nice things in there. It's open source, it's free for everybody, and I think they have a demo section on their website as well. And then other than that, it's really depends. For me, it was X86 PC because it has a lot of instructions and registers to work with. But I think it depends on the person.
Okay, yeah, Freddy, what about you? Your favorite platform to learn size coding for total noobs and veterans, or recommendation in this case?
I will go with Super Rogue with the TIC 80.
Isn't that
I
kind of
think.
cheating though? You're not like you should be like hardcore assembler. Don't you need to be hardcore assembler to be a
Yeah,
real
of course.
demo scene size coding fanatic? Or is
I
that a
think.
myth? Do you think is that a
Well,
myth?
well, when you're a beginner, you have to start somewhere, and I think don't. I also did not start with assembly. I started with out of basic, and I think a similar language would I would prefer it to begin with. So
Okay. Tomcat, what about you? Do you have recommendations of where someone should start doing size coding stuff?
Yeah, if you're speaking about size coding, my vote is x86. Yeah, it has so complex instruction set, so many instructions, many ways to do the same thing. So
Doesn't that
nice.
end up being more distracting than helping you learn, or you think that that's like a good exercise to mature you as a coder for size coding stuff?
Good opportunity to advance your knowledge. So I think it's a,
Yeah, and
this is my recommendation.
Okay.
yeah, and let's not forget shaders as well. You can do go to Shader Toy or and start doing GLSL, and that gives you the basic on graphics coding. And then later you can see if you can scale it down to some smaller sizes.
Some people don't consider size coding anything lower than 1K. So, and it's really hard to do shaders like in 250
Yeah,
512 bytes. I think the shader
yeah.
stuff that I seen done is always 1K. So I guess we can talk about that topic as well. Do you consider that kind of stuff also size coding? What are the things that you get out of it that are
Yeah.
relevant for these size coding categories that we have in Lovebyte specifically of 512 bytes and lower?
Yeah. So I would definitely consider everything size coding. Like technically, anything like 64K and below is size coding. So when we are talking about Lovebyte as being a size coding partly, we're at this point talking about mostly like 256 bytes and lower. But of course, 1Ks and 4Ks are also much considered size coding. And I think a lot of the same concepts, depending on your productions, but uh, some of mine intros have started as shaders and then cut down to be to recode it in assembler. So
Use it
there are a
like
lot
to
of
prototype?
similarities. Yep.
Okay. Freddy, what is your favorite size limit when you do some size coding stuff? And why?
Uh, well, at the moment, 128 bytes. and that's because it's
For the
I've
Atari,
done
right?
on the Atari. I done a few, and it's also not that popular. So that you don't have that much competition as the 256.
Is that a good thing or a
bytes.
bad thing? I mean,
Well,
they say
it can be a good
competition.
thing.
Yeah, they say competition can be good.
Well, it depends. I also like the 256 bytes compo because there are mostly a lot of entries there,
Okay.
and a lot of variation. So yeah, I like both sides coding.
Okay. Why those limits though?
Well, below that, it's really difficult on the Atari at least. When you go below 128 bytes, it gets really difficult to get something interesting on the screen. And well, for me, it's a nice size to code in.
Okay, fair enough. Tomcat, what about you? What is your favorite size limit to do some size coding on?
For me, it's very uncomfortable below 256 bytes. So I think the most important category for me is 256 bytes, but I like a bit more. So 512 and 1K as well, because I think if I want to do good music with a very good visual, 256 it's not too much. So why? At the moment, I think 1K is the optimal size for me.
Okay, Superogue, what about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna say 128 or 256 bytes still. But recently started to do some smaller stuff. So like 32 bytes. That's
How does it
kind of-
compare the Spectrum versus the DOS stuff?
to me, yeah, on DOS you can do little bit more, but I was still surprised what I was able to do in a Spectrum, especially with my limited experience. But yeah, it didn't disappoint me. I did one thing for the Atari 8-bit recently. Freddie fixed up an Atari for me, which I received. And I must say, doing 6502 and getting something on screen was a lot more effort than on Spectrum.
Okay. Next question. What is, in your opinion, the most underrated intro of Superogue?
This is one I cannot pronounce. You want me to try my best? Or
You can give the English version and then ask Tomcat
yeah,
for
I
the
will say the
translation.
English version, and Tomcat can say it in Hungary. It's an Hungarian intro by Molecular, and it's called Jesus' Bleeding Heart is a solar flare or something similar. Tomcat.
Yes, Jézus szíve okozza a napkitörést.
Obviously, that's how I would say
Yes.
it as well. Superogue, why is that one of your favorite entries?
I don't know. It's been released a little while ago, and yes, it did win a function lots of years ago. But maybe it's just me because I've been out of the demo scene. But I didn't know about this entry for a while, and when I saw it, I was just amazed with the color scheme and the effect. I really like it a lot.
Function has a long tradition to have
Yes.
size coding stuff as well, which is cool to have on a relatively new school party. Function isn't that old compared to older events there are around. Freddy, can you tell us what is your most underrated intro in your opinion?
Well, I did look up some of the intros at Demozoo and Poet, and actually I kind of agree with what the ratings are. So when the ratings are low, I completely agree with it. So I don't have any real underrated size coding intro. At least I did not see it yet.
Okay, fair enough. Tomcat, what about you? What is the most underrated intro that you are aware of?
Oh, already said that my favorite intro is Spirit
By
from
Rolla.
Rolla, and I think it's so good. I think it's underrated at the moment.
Even
So
even if
I
it
choose
is
this one.
quite known, you still feel that it's people should know more about it.
Yeah.
I think overall the size coding categories aren't that known. They are known in the demo scene somewhat, but they are still a bit not that much known outside. And it also depends a lot on the category. 256 bytes is clearly the category that is more famous in the demo scene and outside of the demo scene. And this leads me to the next question: what are the differences between the different size categories that makes 256 bytes so popular right now, and is it going to change as a trend on the following years as computers evolve and that stuff? Superogue, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, so 256 bytes is definitely the most famous category. I'm personally hoping for some of the smaller categories to get a bit more traction, and hopefully with Lovebyte we bring some more uh, spotlight to like 128 and 64 and 32 because
I
there's
personally
some.
would like to see more 512 byte intros,
Yes, that's
but
the other
most
thing
of
I
the
wanted.
size coders that I talk to, they all say, "Ah, that's too much work.
Yeah,
I have to prepare a whole thing, not just code an effect."
I agree, and I have to give Tomcat some props for doing two DOS intros in 1K. But yeah, I'm also looking into 512 bytes myself because I think that entity that's it's exciting category because it's somewhere between 1K and 256 bytes, obviously, but it doesn't allow directly for shaders, but it allows for more stuff than you can put in a 256 byte intro.
Definitely. Freddy, same question for you. What is your favorite? What are the differences between the different size categories?
Well, the difference are really obvious, like the popularity of the 256 bytes and the old school versus the new school. Like I would love to have more uh, entries in the old school categories
Mm-hmm.
for like 256 and 128. But I also, yeah, would like to do something bigger, like 512 or 1K.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I sometimes do 16K intros, and that's a lot of work. So uh, there has to be something in between, like maybe 4K. Uh,
I want
for,
to
for
ask you a question in particular because for DOS people, mostly it's the sound that sort of pushes the boundary between 128 to 500 to 256 bytes. Is it the same on the Atari, or do you always have sound by default because it's so easy to access the sound?
well, sound is easy to access, but if you have to make something really interesting, like
Mm-hmm.
some piece of music or a uh, little sound effect, and it would take some more bytes, and I think it would help to have like 256 for the music and the same amount for the FX.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there are some intros on the Atari 8-bit which are almost completely music and a little bit of FX, and the other way around. So yeah, I think it would be a nice compromise to have more bytes for both music and sound.
Tomcat, we I already talked with you about this, but the difference between the different kind of size categories. You said a lot that you prefer the 512 and 1K because you have more room to do things. Is there any other thing in particular you would like to add?
Yeah, I think 128 and lower, there is no real music, only sound and or something ambient or so. And in 256, you have chance for a very good visual or a good music, but not both. So if you want a good visual and good music, I think you need more space. So 512 or 1K is the perfect.
Do you think an intro or a good intro needs to have sound? Do like any good size coding intros come into mind that don't have any sound at all? I think back in the 90s we used to have a lot more intros without sound, but nowadays if you don't have sound, it's kind of like you didn't really finish the job. Do you agree with that, Tomcat?
Yes. 20 years ago, 4K has no sound.
Yeah.
Today, 256 must have something for your yes.
That's 20 years of evolution right there. Sound is everywhere. Superogue, do you agree? Want to add anything about the need to have sound on a size coding?
No, there's no need for sound. Like I said, I also like some of the smaller productions, and they don't always have sound. Uh, so if the effect is good, it doesn't need sound. It does help with setting some atmosphere and yeah, and setting some mood for your intro. And having music is even better. But yeah, so yeah, it definitely adds.
Freddy, same question.
Well, I would like to have music in all the intros, but yeah, my first 256 bytes intro was also without sound. And I remember that Jak told me you have to add some sound, even if it's noise, or just add some sound. And yeah, I was a little bit stubborn and just added some text at it. So yeah,
So text saying I didn't have time to add sound.
yeah. But I understand now that it adds to the rest of it. So I would definitely add some sound, even if it's like an industrial noise.
Sound effect kind of stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Another question that I have relating to sound is different methods of generating sound. I guess in the Atari you don't have that many different ways to go about it. It's more a DOS kind of question, but would you like to talk a little bit about that? Different ways to generate sound?
Well, on the Atari you have lots of possibilities to generate sounds, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the Pokey chip, which has 4 channels. So you can apply this to get some sound effects, and well, just poke some hardware registers and get some sound out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the graphical chip also has a beeper sound. So you can even use the graphical chip and index it from a graphics effect, and then use the same index and get some noise out of it. So
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's automatically synced and everything. That's great.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of possibilities just to first make the effect and then later on find out the right places to add some post to hardware registers to get some sound out of it. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, it's a lot of experimenting with it.
All right. Tomcat, you want to tell us a little bit about the different ways that you can generate sound on, I guess, DOS? It's your main platform.
Yes. There are 2 main possibilities. One is the general MIDI, but you need an emulator, and the other is the speaker. This is the 2 main way. I think I prefer the PC speaker. It's a hard way, but I like it. I think the general MIDI fits really to the Windows size coding. So I had, I think, only 2 intros with General MIDI for DOS, and tried to use it for a Windows intro. And the speaker has more way too, because you can just beep with that timer, or you can play pulse wave modulation, and you can do some byte or soft synth, and this is the real challenge. So this is what I like.
Okay, cool. Superogue, what's your take
Yes.
on methods of generating sounds?
Yeah, pretty much what Tomcat said, and I think Tomcat made some cool stuff with sound, also in his 256 bytes intros. But if you want to do good sound from a PC speaker, then you're going to have to do like a 512 byte or 1K. I find it hard to do good soft synth in 256, but it is possible. Jet lag, that's 2 amazing intros.
They did their
Yeah.
own synth, well, hack
Yes.
kind of synth, but
Yeah.
they still.
But obviously, in those intros, the sound came first, and then see what's left for an effect to match the remaining bytes. But still, the overall result is pretty good there.
By the way, is there a place where this kind of stuff and methods is documented? I know there is. I just want you to plug it. So
Okay, yeah. So we have a Sizecoding Discord. You can find it via the demo scene Discord and then the Lovebyte website. There we share a lot of stuff for all platforms: TIC80, 6502 machines, Z80, x86, ARM. Everybody is welcome. There's sizecoding.org. We try to make some guides for different platforms to get you started. But if you want to go into music specifically, then there are lots of papers and methods that you can research and see if there's new ways to generate sound that people have not looked into yet.
Guy asked a question when we were asking people for questions that they might have for the roundtable. You have 40 bytes left. Would you spend it on sound and it's not going to be very good, or do you spend it elsewhere and have a fully silent intro? So what would you do with if you had this decision tomorrow? What would you do, Superogue?
If I'm gonna be honest, probably gonna spend it on sound. Just at least have some sound in there. I think maybe other people here will make different choices.
But it's
And I
not going to be
understand-
very good.
Yeah, but at least you can get some bass sound or some ambient out. I'm okay with ambient sound. Sometimes I think it adds. So if I'm gonna do the Helmut thing here and plug one of my intros. But I think on Haiku, the intro I made.
For revision, wasn't it?
No, Haiku was for
Outline?
no, it was not Flash Party, but the other
A failed
US
effects.
no, whatever. But it's
I'm going to look it up while we talk.
yeah. So for Haiku, I think there was some kind of a droning sound, and I think it added to the experience and the theme of the intro. And
At party.
it was not very costly.
At
So in
party.
that case,
That was.
at party.
And you did have to make a decision between design and stuff. And we do see a lot of people tending to go more towards design. I want to say nowadays compared to before, but we always had that tendency. I think when size coders start to look at what they can have, the way to distinguish themselves is by having some sort of concept behind it. Do you all agree with this assumption? Anyone wants to have some words on that? So same question about the 40 bytes. What would you do with the 40 bytes? Would you have some horrible sound just to have sound, or would you have a silent intro instead? F ready.
I would have horrible sound as always.
I have standards to keep.
Yeah,
I started this in '89 with horrible sound, and I will keep doing it.
yeah.
Tomcat, what about you?
Uh, Definitely no, not for me.
You would keep
So
silent?
yeah, keep silent, and I would make a build up for the intro, a little story, something, not showing everything immediately, or make some extra for the effects, maybe some add some shadows or something easy thing, because I don't really like the ambient and 40 bytes is nearly enough for some beep music.
Some beep music.
Yes, about 16 notes maybe, but it's not very good. For example, at my intro, Killing Your Eyes, there was some opportunity to do this, and I add some beeper music, but it doesn't have the intro, I think. So usually I spend for some build up.
Okay. It's personal decisions, I guess, and we end up seeing those in the end result. Another question I have: what is your favorite or least favorite part of size coding, Superogue?
Oh, I think in general I think the favorite part is coming up with the idea and maybe doing a first prototype of your idea and getting excited for the idea that you have. And then my least favorite part is kind of also my favorite part. I like it and dislike it similarly, but it is the fine tuning at the end. I like to fine tune a lot when I can, when I have the time. Sometimes I don't have the time, but if I have the time to fine tune, I dislike the process, but I also think it's necessary, and I also kind of like it. That's my answer.
Is it at that point that it all like comes together?
I think it's good for an intro when you think it's finished to let it breathe a little bit and then come back to it and tweak some more, because I think um it's there's something to add there after you think your intro is finished.
Okay. F Reddy, same question. What is your favorite or least favorite part of size coding?
I think the favorite part is that when you're just experimenting with an effect and discover some unexpected behavior of the chips, or just make a mistake and it looks good, and you build on that. I think that's the nice thing. Also, when you're just having a good idea and it works out like you imagine it. So yeah, that are the things I like about the size coding.
Or about the
What I
least
dis-
favorite things? What do you
what
really dislike about size coding?
what I dislike is when I really have a good idea and try to implement it, and the hardware is doing something completely different. So it's working really against me, and it takes a lot of bytes to get something done. And yeah, that's you simply discover that there are limits, and you cannot overcome them, and you have to try something completely different.
Oof, sad times, rough
Yes,
times.
rough times.
Tomcat, what about you? What's your favorite and least favorite part of size coding?
My favorite part is for hunting for bytes. Make it shorter and shorter. So many thinking, brain work. So this is my favorite part. And what I dislike, hunting for bugs, because something went wrong and cannot do as I want. I have to use my debugger. This is the worst part of size coding.
Well, when you're optimizing for size and suddenly bugs arrive out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And you have to roll back versions, try to figure out when you introduce the bug.
Yes,
Oof.
step back.
What was your first size coding project? I'm going to change the order of people just to change things up. So, Tomcat, what was your first size coding project?
I can mention more things because when I was 8, I was coding for ZX81 and it has only 1K memory. So
It's already size coding.
it was size coding as well. But if I mention ZX Spectrum with the 8K memory, and we ported the game for that computer from the PC. It was size coding as well. And my first 4K was size coding in 1995 at Assembly. And my first 1K was in 1996 at an Antique party, Antique. And in 216, the first 256 bytes intro. This was my came back to the demo scene at QB party. So I like QB party very much.
Freddy, same question for you. What was your first size coding project?
Actually, that was in 2014 at the Silly Venture. They asked me to join the party and also to make something and join the 16 kilobyte competition. So I had a lot of work on the 16K demo. And when I took my flight to Gdansk, I wrote some notes on paper, like I had some idea about 256 intro, and I coded it in my hotel and did some party coding together with Jack, who helped me with some optimizing. And that was a really great start for the size coding stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Superogue, what about you?
It's an unreleased intro because I'm only doing size coding since 2020, and then I think in November 2019 I did an unreleased thing called Bumblebee, which had some byte beat music and some yellow and black effect, but I did not like it a lot. And then towards Christmas I wrote Homogenic, which then released in January at rsync, which I thought was better. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask you guys a question. How much do you get rusty from not practicing size coding? Like if you spend like 1 year without doing any size coding stuff, do you have to relearn all the opcodes and all the old tricks, or does it just stay in your brain forever? I see you nodding, so I'm gonna ask you first, Freddy. So does it go away, or is it always there?
No, it's always there. It has been there since 1989 when I started typing in my instructions codes in the monitor. We did not use an assembler by then. So I still know some instruction codes by head. So it, yeah, when there is a gap, 1 or 2 years, or maybe even 10 years, I still remember the instructions.
Okay. Tomcat, what about you?
I think x86 I won't forget. Never.
So many opcodes, so many registries and stuff, and you
It's so
remember
many
all of it?
exercises behind me. So, but what about ZX Spectrum? I can forget it very quickly. I think 1 year, and I don't remember for the instructions. I have to learn it. So I think it depends how much experience, how many exercises behind you. So
Interesting.
it's,
Okay, Superogue, same question.
Yeah, I think when doing something for multiple platforms, I did some retro games for various older machines, and I found it then when you switch to a different assembler or a different mindset, it takes a couple of weeks to get into, and then when you're into it, it goes very quickly. But when you switch to a different platform, you still have to reset a bit. I think 8xx86 I would say is pretty much in my head right now, and I would probably not forget it very soon. But for example, the last time I touched ARM assembler was like in 2002, and I would probably have to relearn it from scratch all again if I ever touch it again.
Okay, another question. How much time do you spend on average on an intro that you make, Superogue?
Anything from 4 hours, like Caron. Technically, some of the tunnel stuff was done, but a couple of hours or a day. Haiku was done in a day. And I think Enigma took the longest. That was almost a month. Yeah.
Why didn't you
So,
put sound on Enigma? You should have done a final version with sound, like with double the
yeah,
size.
there are some other fixes. Maybe someday. I just didn't have any time.
Okay, fair enough. F Ready, same question. How much time do you spend on average on an intro that you do?
It really depends. Some intros I did in like 3 or 4 hours. Some are really a couple of evenings, and also spending the weekend. So really like maybe 20 to 30 hours.
Okay. Tomcat, what about you?
I think from 3 days to till 2 months is maybe.
But continuous, or like you have it in your head and then a few weeks later you pick it up again?
I have to do some other things as well, the work and the family, of course. So yes, but very often I do it, and maybe I'm not at my computer and do the coding in my mind. So yes, I'm working with. For a 1K intro, you need more time, of course, but the 256 bytes, it's sometimes take very long to do to finish. Take it, get it again, and add some extra stuff, optimizing. I got too many free bytes and add other things to the intro. So yes, it's iterative and sometimes still 2 months is
Okay. Talking about code, do you prototype in a different language first, or you just directly write the intro that you have in your mind, Superogue?
Depends. Some of the intros have been sort of improvised. Fluxus, my first ZX Spectrum intro, was like that. And was not prototyped. All my ZX Spectrum stuff was not prototyped.
Did you do ZX Spectrum stuff directly into machine code, or did you like write proto code and then transfer it to machine
for
code?
For ZX Spectrum, not. But some of the stuff I think homogenic a bit, but mostly Enigma and the tunnel effect from Caron were prototyped in a shader first, and then transferred to C, and then Blossom did the FPU code, and then it was a quick implementation in assembler.
Okay. Freddy, what about you? Do you usually prototype in another language, or you go directly to to your final?
I think I should do more prototyping, but until now I did not do any prototyping. Just start up the assembler,
Okay.
start coding my idea. Yeah.
Okay. Tomcat, what about you?
Oh, very, very rare when I'm prototyping, but I had 2 or 3 intros when I used shader toy for prototyping.
The ones that you use, like ray tracing stuff or ray marching stuff?
For QB Taurus, maybe you remember it, and Hypervibes. In shader toy, it was easier to adjust and experiment some things. I made a environment similar to the PC DOS environment, and after it was just compile the code to assembly from the shader toy. I have some prototype for the ray tracing stuff as well, but the intro was made earlier than this prototype. It's a prototype for another intro at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Really cool. If you could add one assembler instruction, what would it be? Tomcat, I'll start with you this time.
Okay. I would like to have a three operand idiv, so a division with 3 registers, similar to the multiplication with 3 registers, because the very limited the division instruction at DOS. You have to use the AX and DX registers and more uniformed version. So the serial operand idiv, I would like to see this one.
Okay. Superogue, what about you?
Sort of similar. The a division instruction that doesn't also require maybe DX or a different setup, and maybe some loop instructions that loop through different registers than CX on does.
Okay.
But yeah.
Freddy?
Well, for the 6502, it would be nice to have a sign instruction to just generate a sign in 265 bytes, because it always takes up a lot of bytes for every intro when you need a sign.
You have like a sign table?
Sorry?
You have a sign table, or we're talking about sign plus and minus?
Well, generate a sign table with a little piece of code.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking then.
Yeah, and also it would be nice to what was I going to say? To have something that automatically increases the frame counter. It's one of the rare things that the Atari 8-bit has that I'm very happy with. But it would be nice to have something like that on the PC. But alas.
Yeah.
Are there any specific tools that you use aside from an assembler? Tomcat already mentioned his shader toy thing. Are there other tools that you use aside from the assembler?
I use HackerView, hex editor. After when I compiled my code, I usually first check with hex editor. It can show the code, the compiled code, and I can see where are the waste of bytes, where are the long instructions. I use this one.
Okay. Freddy, what about you?
Well, I think I have enough with the cross assembler, the IDE from Jak, and the wonderful emulator Altera, which has debug options and a monitor, so you can just break into the intro and see what's going on, see where there are optimizations or where there is a bug. Or so.
Superogue?
Altera is really helpful. Yeah.
Superogue?
Yeah, a couple. I do like Tomcat also use a hex editor for some to see if there's some constants that you can use. Sometimes CodeLife for doing prototyping shaders, which is like an offline shader toy. And sometimes we made a tool to look for some palette stuff called Patron, and sometimes we use that to search for colors and stuff.
Okay. Should headers be included in the byte count? From what size? So this is, I think, the compromise that we did at Lovebyte was that 128 and lower, we don't count the headers, and 128 higher, we do count the headers. So Superogue, I guess I'll start with you since you're organizer at Lovebyte. Well, why these compromises, and do you think it's a controversial decision? Would other people feel different?
I think especially you have to draw a line somewhere, because where else you're gonna stop? So if you say we always allow for headers, for example, Tomcat made some very nice Windows intros on 512 bytes, but like half of that was the Windows header. So could we have submitted those to a 256 byte compo for Windows? Maybe not. Or maybe I have a Game Boy thing with 160 or 192 byte header, and I have a 8 byte intro. Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah. So at least you can't compare between different platforms.
Yeah. So I think from so for Lovebyte, the thing was we wanted to have a sort of level playing ground for everybody. And for some people, it's going to be more of a problem than for others. But I think if you are clear about the rules, then people will submit or don't. But I think 256 bytes, you don't need to. You count the header, so you count the size of the binary. 128, it can go either way. And below that, I think it's unfair if you have a 64 byte intro and the half of it is a header on a ST. It's a bit of a disadvantage.
What were other parties doing? Like we talked about Outline having Sizecoding compos. Function has as well, but I think 256 bytes only. But there are some Russian parties that also have a lot of Sizecoding stuff. Did you check those rules?
Yes. So for ZX Spectrum, it's usually like 256 bytes binary, and then you have a basic stub that loads. And then for Commodore, you can give the start address, and it's only a few bytes header overhead. So I think only on Atari ST, for obvious reasons, they don't count a header. For example, at I think for 256 bytes, I think at all Atari ST parties, they don't count the header. So something like, I think there was a Mona port, which was like 280 bytes, and it counted as a 256 bytes. Yeah, okay, I can understand the reasoning, but I think for 256 bytes, come on, you have enough code left to make something nice.
F-Ready, same question. Should headers be included? What are the size that they should not be counted?
I think from the comparing perspective, it's really nice to have just the file size and see that the file is really the size that you expect. And if it's more than that, it should be entered in another compo, I think. But on the other hand, if there were not these rules not yet in place, then there's something to say about having to count just the code and the data and just ignore the headers from all the platforms and have a more of a comparable playing field for all the platforms. That would be nice to have.
Yeah, I guess it really depends if your party is just focusing on a specific platform. So in that sense, it doesn't really make sense if you remove others or not, because everyone will be having the same thing. It's when you try to include multiple old school platforms into the same compo that you start having to deal with these issues and need to find a middle ground somewhere to do these
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
things.
Yeah.
Tomcat, what about you? What's your opinion?
I think the file size is the important thing in my point of view. So I have not familiar with this problem because I don't do intros for Ethereum or
Spectrum.
this kind of intros platforms. So yes, we can call an intro 8-byte Windows intro, but the size at least 300 bytes. So no, it's not my problem, I think. So I have no good opinion about it.
Okay. Last question about code. What is your most underrated instruction? Like an instruction that people really should use? Tomcat, I'll start with you again.
Yes, I like the bit test instruction, and it's used very rare. It has a short version if you use a register for indexing the bits. So it very rarely used, and it's quite powerful. If you want to do some compression, it doesn't matter what kind of music or text, you have to use the bit test instructions.
Okay. Freddy, what about you?
I think the branch on overflow is not used that much because it's you can use it as a branch always, and it takes only 2 bytes instead of a jump, which takes 3 bytes. So it always saves 1 byte, and I've seen a lot of code with uses a jump for a loop, and you can use the branch not overflow instead.
Okay. Superogue, what about you? What's your most underrated instruction?
I'm a fan of the AAA instruction. It's a 1-byte instruction on x86, and it does a ASCII adjust after an addition, and basically it does some some weird modulo kind of thing. So I use that, and it also, if you do it with a 0 or no value, it also doesn't a compare flag. And I have to mention xlot-b, which is loads a byte from index AL and puts it into AL in a single byte. So that's also nice.
Okay. Let's move on to visuals. Which platform has the prettiest standard color palette? This is going to be a controversial discussion. Superogue, I'll start with you.
Definitely not the ZX Spectrum.
Yeah, I guess you have to say C64, even though it's
probably.
though it's ugly. The other ones are uglier. So
yeah, probably.
Hey, Freddy, what about you? Are you gonna say Atari?
I'm going to say Atari, of course.
Tomcat, what about you? What is the prettiest standard color palette?
Yeah, in my heart is the ZX Spectrum, so I keep it.
Fair
Okay,
enough.
super.
Do you prefer a certain style of visuals? What is your favorite style of visuals? It's a hard question. Freddy, do you have a preferred style?
No, I don't have a preferred style. I just try what is possible in the machine, and no, there's not a specific style. When I see something which I like, and it's not that I want to copy it, or it's just have my own style and just do what is possible with the machine.
Okay, Superogue.
Not one style, but I do like to experiment with different styles. So, for example, in haiku, once again, I tried something deliberately with only monochrome colors. So everything is 2 colors, I can see something for just a black and white intro. And then, for example, with Enigma, we try to polish, make the best out of a color palette. I like to experiment with different styles.
Okay, Tomcat, what about you? You have a certain style of visuals that you prefer?
I don't really like glitches or dithering. I like the clear, smooth things and the 3D or something matte heavy visual. So that is my favorites.
Okay. On the more standard demo scene, there's a lot of people focusing on specific aesthetics, like a certain design. Do you guys feel a bit more limited on size coding in that regard, that you can't really, or is that like an easier way to reach a concept when you find a specific aesthetic style that you're gonna aim for? What do you think about that, Super Rogue?
Yeah. I think on 256 bytes, especially if you have some control of your palette, I think you can set up your style pretty well. So I don't think for smaller sizes it's specific. It is limiting your creativity. So no.
Freddy?
I agree with Super on that.
Okay. Tomcat, you agree as well?
I agree too.
Okay. That was easy.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to tell a narrative in small sized categories? I'm going to just say yes for everyone and move on to the next question.
Sure.
Gargai asks, where's the optimal line between an impressive coding feat and an aesthetically pleasing result? So we already had this question on another, but let's open it up to the rest of the panel. So Super Rogue, what is your answer to this?
Yeah. Yeah. Ideally, you don't want it to matter, but if for the smaller the sizes, the more it matters that it is a technical feat. So for yourself, a technical feat can be very good and fulfilling, and that can be enough reasons to release an intro. And just for your own amusement or the fun that you had creating it. So in that regard, but for the general viewing audience, especially those not familiar with the smaller size categories, I think the end result is all that matters.
Okay. Freddy?
Yeah, sure. The end result matters, but well, I think when you're looking at size coding entries, you already know already have a context, and you know what is possible. And if you don't know what is possible, then you really cannot enjoy it. I think you have to have some context and some idea about how difficult or how easy it is to create something like that. And so I think that the technical aspect really counts in size coding.
What about people who are not coders, for example, a musician? How can they judge size coding entry? They can't?
Well, yeah, they can in some degree. Also, when I look at, for example, MS-DOS or other platforms like Spectrum, I first look at the style and look at when there are too many bugs or glitches, and you know that is not right. And but it's a little bit a balance between the technical side and the style of it. It's my opinion.
Tomcat, same question. Where's the optimal line between an impressive coding feat and an aesthetically pleasing result?
If you want your entry high rated and high voted, your entry cannot be ugly. So the design is very important for. Maybe this is one of the reasons why I cannot do smaller productions. So I think it's very important, and there is a styles where cannot be quite good, cannot be designed well, and it's not good for me, and it's not good for the people who is voting for your prod. So design is very important.
Okay. I have a surprise for you. I'm out of questions. Does anyone have anything they would like to add or question each other?
No, I want to continue a little bit on what you were saying earlier about. I would be interested to know what you would think, maybe as a bit of a more outsider to size coding. What would be things that could help people outside of size coding understand the limits better, or the constraints, or should just the production speak for themselves? And
I think it's mostly seeing others in the same category, and in that sense, a big compo works very well because you see the limitations of what has been happening on the exactly same limitations, and then when you start reaching the top level ones, you start wondering, why does this have like 4 effects and the other one only had 2? Why does this have so much better sound and the other one only had like a beep? And I think at that point it starts clicking on how much you can achieve on the limits of the platform. I think that's the only real better way of getting a better knowledge of the limits of the machine is when you watch enough entries of that specific machine to have that sense. And in some platforms it's really hard because there aren't that many entries, like the Apple II. There aren't that many size coding entries for the Apple II, and you see one and you're like, maybe it's awesome. I have no clue. It looks okay. So it's really hard to judge in that regard. Unless you had an Apple II and you saw the kind of horrible games that they sold back then.
So we have a couple of playlists at Lovebyte. So hopefully that helps the audience see what's out there for the different platforms.
Definitely. Anything else left to add, Tomcat? Would you like to say anything else or ask a question, the rest of the panel?
Just for Superogue, thank you for organizing this great party.
You're welcome.
And good luck for organizing.
Freddy, same question to you. Do you have any specific question or last comment you would like to add before we wrap things up?
Well, I just hope that there are some viewers who get an idea about size coding and maybe try something themselves, and maybe in the TIC 80, or just try some old school platforms. But, I hope there are some demo sceners or some outsiders still enjoying this and also start size coding. That would be nice.
I have one more final question. How harder is it to do something for an old school platform compared to PC? And I guess this question is more for Superogue because he has experience on both. But we can extend to the rest of the panel if they are interested in adding anything. So Superogue.
Yeah, I think Tomcat also has some experience with ZX Spectrum. I think you have different limitations. So if you're realistically about what you can achieve on a platform, then it's learning the assembler, learning the ins and outs of the platform you're targeting, and going with those limits. So in that effect, there's not so much change, or one is harder than the other. It's just having different expectation of what you want to achieve and act accordingly.
Okay. Freddy, did you ever do anything for DOS and PC?
No.
So you have no point of comparison.
He wants to learn, though.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to learn.
Tomcat,
I'm
what about you?
a little stuck on the 8-bit.
Okay, that's a start.
It's a start.
The
Tomcat,
the big difference is the CPU power. So for ZX Spectrum, only has 3.5 megahertz, and for the PC you have 4 gigahertz. It's very different. When you start to code something, you have to use many tables for the old school platforms to do something in good speed. So this is the main difference, I think.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining in, and I'm not sure what's next on the schedule, but it should be information about it. So thank you everybody who joined in the roundtable. Don't know if Superogue wants to add some final words before we wrap this up.
I hope people enjoy Lovebyte. If there are any questions, you can check with us on Discord, and we'll be happy to answer and show you what's around. Watch the playlists if you're new to this, and hope you enjoy it.
Okay. Have fun, everybody. See you
Bye-bye.
around. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.